It's time to make 3 more great projects using 2x4s. Let's begin. For project number 1, we're going to need 2 boards. Also, try to get the ones that are as straight as possible and have a minimal amount of knots. And I'm going to be using a miter saw to make most of these cuts, but if you only have a circular saw, you should still be able to do it if you're very careful. And then we cut each of the boards down into a 5-foot and a 3-foot so that we'll have 2 of each. Now grab the 2 3-foot boards and we want to put them together on their sides. We want to get them as flush as possible on the ends. Then take 2 clamps, clamp 1 on each side so they don't move around. And once you have the clamps in place, we're going to take a measuring tape and measure in 15.5 inches from each side and make a mark. And once we have both of the marks in place, we need a speed square or some type of straight edge because we want to make these lines nice and dark and make sure they're all the way across both boards. And once those lines are nice and dark, we then want to take the measuring tape once again, and this time measure in 17 inches from both sides and make a mark. And just like the previous ones, I made sure the lines went all the way across and are nice and dark. Now if by chance you have a knot in the way like I do here, there's a good chance that this might fall out in this cutting process and I'll have to glue it back in. If that's the case, glue it in place and just make sure it stays there. Otherwise, try to avoid the knots so you don't have this problem. And to help prevent any confusion, let's put some X's right in between these lines so we know exactly where we're going to cut. Now this next step can be a little bit tricky because right there where we have these X's, we need to make cuts, but they can't go all the way through. We want them to only be 1.5 inches deep. So if you have a circular saw, this step might actually be a little bit easier with one of these versus a miter saw, but let me show you both. With your circular saw, make sure it doesn't have a battery and it's not plugged in. And we want to take a look at the blade here. Grab your measuring tape and we want to measure from the bottom of this plate 1.5 inches, making sure that our blade does not stick further down than that. So make your adjustments so that it's only 1.5 inches. And once the blade's set up, grab a speed square or a nice straight edge, and we're going to use it as a guide for your circular saw to make these cuts. We want to make sure that we stay in between those 2 lines that we did and make those 1.5 inches cuts all the way across so that we have a nice dado in each of these pieces. When it comes to a miter saw, we have to figure out the depth cut adjustment, which is right here on my saw. Some saws may be different. That is what limits how far the blade can actually cut down. Once we've figured out where that is, we need to do several measurements to make sure it's only going to cut 1.5 inches deep. Also, this is a sliding miter saw, which allows the cut to be all the way even across. If you don't have a sliding saw, there's always a chance you may have a little bit of a U in the bottom of your cut that you'll have to chisel out. Once I have that depth of cut figured out, I'm now going to take a piece of scrap wood and stick it behind the boards that I actually want to cut. And that'll help eliminate that U that I was talking about before. And remember, as we're making these cuts, to stay in between the 2 lines that we've made. We can always go back and remove a little bit more wood if we need to. We can't replace it if we've already cut it. And as you're cutting up to those lines, it's a good idea to take one of the other boards and kind of measure with it. And in this case, it's a little on the snug side. I'd rather it be a little snug here than too loose, but don't cut these too big. Also, if you notice, the knot that I had in the way actually did not come out. It stayed in place, so that is good. Otherwise, if it does for you, just glue it back. With the 3-foot boards now done, we can remove these clamps. We can set these to the side and grab the 5-footers because we got to work on those. On the 5-foot boards, we're going to clamp it together just like we did on the 3-foot boards on each end. But then measuring only from one end, we're going to measure down 17.5 inches and 21 inches. And with that 17.5 and that 21, I made sure we had lines going all the way across. And then we're going to take that measuring tape one more time. We're going to measure it 19 inches and 22.5 inches and make sure we have lines all the way across just like we did on the other boards. And definitely remember to add those X's in between the lines so we don't get confused on where to cut. And then we're going to repeat that cutting process just like we did before at only 1.5 inches deep. And in case you've ever wondered, that is how you can do dados in your wood without having to have a table saw. Now take the 5-foot boards and we want to space them out about 2 inches, give or take. And then take one of the 3-foot boards and we want to intersect the two dados we have in this board with, let's say, the top or the bottom, your choice, but we're going to intersect them with both boards. I'm going to choose the top here and just kind of slide it into place. You may have to do a little bit of a movement trying to get it into position, but once you do, they should slide together. You may need a little mallet to help with that as well. You may want to also consider using some glue in each of these joints before pounding them together so it's a more of a permanent hold. I'm going to use number 3 because there's a good chance this right here will go outside and I need something that's waterproof. And there you go. It's a nice large cross that could look good inside your house or out. Now I would suggest staining this in maybe like a dark brown or maybe even like a weathered gray. I believe that would look really good, and I hope you get a chance to make one. For project number 2, we're going to need one board. We're cutting out 3 pieces, one at 3.5, one at 10.5, and one at 17.5. Now looking at the 17.5 inch board, we need a square or a straight edge. Either way, we need to measure in 1 3/4 inches from the side and then 1 3/4 inches from the end. And right where they cross, we need to make sure that those lines line up. Once we have that first mark, we want to repeat that on the opposite side as well, but don't stop there. We need to do the same on the 10.5 inch and one more time on the 3.5 inch. Once we have all the marks in place, we need to drill a hole that's 1.5 inches wide, but only a 1/2 inch deep. And the best way to do that is to use a Forstner bit. This can be used in a regular drill and can be found at your local stores or online. If you don't have any, I'll put a link to that in the description. Little heads up when you're using a Forstner bit. If you'll notice here, it's kind of oblong and misshaped. That's because the bit moved around on me because I didn't have it straight up and down when I first started it. Fortunately, this wood's thick enough, we can flip it over and do a better piece on the other side. But just be careful you don't mess it up. Now time to attach them all together. And it's gonna look something like that. But we're gonna start with attaching the small one and the middle one first. And we want to make sure it's nice and centered, so you may need to do some measurements, but I'm just going to use a couple screws to screw that together. It's also a good idea to pre-drill each of these holes to help prevent cracking. And there we go, it is almost complete. We need to do 2 more things. First off, we need to stain this a dark color, maybe like a dark brown or dark gray or even almost black. Then we want to take some tea light candles. And if I cut these just right, they should all slide into place. Some of them are a little tighter than others. But there you go. It's a great display for maybe a ceremony or a romantic evening with your spouse. Whatever you'd like to do, it's a great little display. And I hope you get a chance to make one. For project number 3, we're going to need a total of 2 boards. That is, unless you have a bunch of scrap wood like I do, left over from previous projects. And if you do, you may not need any boards. And with that scrap or wood, whatever you're using, we need to cut out 117 pieces, little slices of wood. Now keep in mind, we do not want them all the same size. You want some to be real thin, some to be real thick, and some in between. So just kind of mix up all your cuts. And of course, they don't have to be perfect on the ends, but we will have to go back and at least sand off these little burrs. After sanding these down, I've separated them into 3 different groups, kind of a smaller, a medium, and a large section. But I need to create a pile of each of these kind of evenly distributed. In other words, have a small, medium, and large, and just continue that until I have a nice grouping of those, and I can see exactly what I have. Because I need 3 separate piles, one with 47, one with 42, and one with 28. And when you're done, it should look something like this. Now we need to start painting these. We're only going to paint one end, just one ingrained on each side of each of these pieces. The 28 is going to be blue, the 47 is going to be red, and the 42 is going to be white. Looking at the blue and the red, you can tell that the colors went in just fine, but on the white, I'm guessing it just got absorbed into the ingrain, but the white, well, didn't get as white as I thought it would be. But in either case, using pine, since they're 2x4s, well, They still look pretty white to me and should work well. Now that the blue has started to dry, I've taken some white paint and I've stuck it in a cup here. And I've did a couple test pieces here and it seems to be working out well. So I'm just gonna take some of this white paint and dab it just kind of randomly all over these blue pieces and see how it turns out. And there you go. It's not perfect, but it's not supposed to be. At this point, if you haven't guessed already, we are putting together a flag. So let me assemble this together and see if it looks as good as I'm hoping. Now, as I'm putting this together, you may have noticed that I'm not putting all the same levels or all the same thicknesses of wood together, because having this alternating pattern, all these different sizes, will make it look a little bit more realistic, almost like it's waving in the wind. And here's the final result. Now, of course, you could change up the levels and however you wish, maybe have more of an angle going, whatever you'd like. One thing I did learn from this is that, of course, I have a bunch of different levels, but it'd be a good idea if I had maybe a little bit more of the tall ones to kind of offset the levels just a little bit more. But that's totally up to you. The white marks up here didn't come out as light as I was hoping, but you can still tell that it's supposed to be the stars. Now, of course, at this point, I would strongly suggest getting some kind of a backer board or something to attach this to. Otherwise, there's a very good chance, well, they won't glue together if you're going to try and do that. You may want to even consider doing an outside frame to kind of house everything into one large segment. Totally up to you, but here's the final result. I hope you like it. There you have it, 3 more great projects you can build with 2x4s. Now, if you have any comments or suggestions, please list those below. I'd love to hear about it. Plus, you can help out a ton of other people. Otherwise, get out in your shop and have fun building.